Hello guys and welcome to IAMABIKER. And now after a long wait we finally get to test out the Dominar 250. So let's see what it's all about. So first of all, let's quite clearly mark out what the difference is between this and the Dominar 400 is. So even though it looks a lot similar to the 400, or in fact very similar to the 400, there are a lot of changes that that make it more affordable and more practical for our conditions. So up front, now it has got a 37mm fork, a little bit smaller than what is there on the Dominar 400. And when you come towards the center, of course the engine is now different. And then I'm happy that the silencer remains the same, because that is probably one of the key aspects and what makes this bike interesting. More on that later. Come a little bit back, the swing arm is now different. It's now a steel swing arm. Dominar has an aluminum swing arm. And apart from that, the tires are now of smaller dimensions. So basically it still is 17-inch tires, of course, but the front section is now 180 and the rear is a 130 section tire. So makes the bike look a little bit smaller, make a little bit, in some angles, maybe a little bit weirder, especially since we're used to the Dominar 400. But it has been pretty much done to keep of course, the price down, and also for the motorcycle to return a better mileage. Another difference between this and the 400 is that now the Dominar has 2 meters, right? One on up front and one on the tank. So on the 400 you could see the gear position indicator and the time as well, which comes on the meter on the tank, and also used to see the average fuel consumption and the distance to empty, etc. So that is not there now on these meters. It's pretty much straightforward. Now you have the side stand sensor lights and all those that come up over here, and the ignition light basically that comes up instead of all those details. Now the dimensions wise, technically it's pretty much the same dimensions of the 400. The rake and trail remains the same. The weight has come down by 7 kgs, but it still is a little bit heavy at 180 kgs curb weight, but that basically aids it to be a more planted on the highways. I've seen a couple of reviews and a couple of other guys talk about this bike, saying that it does not feel planted on the highways, but we honestly have not felt that. I know that's sort of a issue with the bike, and for the speeds that this bike can do, which is about 100-110 easy cruising on the highway, it feels absolutely planted and there's no issues there. So technically speaking, we are all very familiar with this engine. Now it's there on the new Husqvarnas, it's there on the Duke 250, and now it's there on the Dominar. And essentially the bottom part of the engine, when I say bottom part, I'm talking about the base, gearing, sprocket, all these are the same. So it has still got the same sprocket size as those bikes, but this engine of course now has got a dual spark, which is not there on the other bikes, and also this runs a slightly lesser compression than its counterparts on the other bike. So what that has done is that enabled this bike to run a lot more smoother than before. This bike is basically tuned for the mid-range. Like I said just before that, it's basically meant for a relaxed touring feel, sports touring feel, right? So maybe I would have liked a little bit of initial torque, a bit more, without driving a little bit, because in the first gear I felt that you need to keep it maybe around 2,500-3,000 RPM to get that initial roll, but it's not a problem. Probably something you need to get used to this bike in particular. But the mid-range is superb, and the basic range between 20 to 80, where you're always riding in that range in the city, in that range it is extremely super. So coming to the power, so basically it produces 27 PS of power and 23.5 Nm of torque, plenty for the 250cc segment, and very accessible power, and it's not at all intimidating. In terms of engine character, how it feels, well, it's the same character. I mean, even though it's a slightly lower compression, it still feels very rev happy. So what happens is when you want to get going, when you give it the beans, it really easily rev counter flies up quite easily. I believe the limiter is at 10,500 RPM and it reaches there very fast, and it's very smooth. So only post 9,000 RPM do you feel any vibes that creeps up from the foot pegs and handlebars. But how often are you there, right? you're always in that sweet spot of 3 to 6, 7, 8,000 RPM, and that's where this vehicle is very stable and feels very nice to ride, and it is in fact very smooth to ride in this RPM range as well. So that way it's kind of a very accessible power. So before we got this bike, we had a briefing with Bajaj, and they told us that they want to target this to a lot of first time buyers. With the 400, what happened was there was a little bit of scary feeling for first time buyers when they were thinking about, my first bike, should it be a 400cc and will I be able to handle that much power, and they were losing out on that. So this bike has been designed and conceptualized, targeted for first time buyers to make them feel very comfortable and not intimidating, and it does exactly that. And if you're riding a 200cc bike or a 150cc bike already, you probably might not enjoy it as much as the 400, but for a first time buyer who's coming from a very basic commuter bike, or it's your first bike, definitely makes a lot of sense. So it has got the slipper clutch, so definitely that's a welcome addition, and because of that also assistant slipper clutch. So because of that, clutch activation is also pretty light, not the lightest out there, but definitely light. So from riding it in city when you need constant gear changes, definitely the clutch pull is quite effortless, so that makes it good. In terms of mileage, well, we've been getting roughly close to 40, I would say. A bit of hard-spirited riding quite easily. I think if you have a relaxed normal riding stance with city and highway mix, you should be getting anywhere between 40, 42 quite easily. And we did push it once a little bit on the highways and to see what this engine is capable of, but it did pull to that 120 quite easily, and then took a little bit of time from there to reach to about 140. But in general, I think it feels quite good, and even on highways, the engine and the sound and everything, even in low revs, because of this double barrel exhaust sound, it feels very throaty and it feels very sporty to ride. In terms of handling, since rake and trail remain the same, it's pretty much the same handling as the 400. It is, like I said before, 7 kgs lighter, and let's forget the fact that it is 7 kgs lighter. Let's look at it at this bike. So this is 180 kgs of curb weight, but once this vehicle gets moving, you really do not feel that weight. Yes, if you are sitting on the bike and you're trying to move it around, it does feel a little bit heavy, and it might get a little bit difficult for shorter riders if you're pushing it around. But once it gets moving, absolutely no hint of that weight anywhere, and it feels easy to ride in the city in slow traffic conditions, and it's surprisingly nimble even though it has got a large wheelbase. And on the highways, like I said earlier, it does feel planted. This one's comfortable cruising speed, like I told you, is about that 110 mark, and there it feels absolutely fine, and we not face any issues there. The tires, yes, these make a little bit difference when you compare it with the 400, but first of course is the visual difference, and I'm not a huge fan of the Eurogrip. So this one comes stock with the Eurogrip tires, and probably you put in a little bit more stickier rubber, it would feel much more confidence inspiring overall feel of the bike. So in terms of suspensions, I mean, it's weird. Bajaj tells us that it is a 37 from fork, and apart from that there is no huge changes. Either your suspension is the same, but we somehow feel that this is a bit more softer than before, and more a plush suspension than on the 400. In terms of ride quality, it soaks up all the bad potholes, bad roads quite well. Of course, it is not an off-road vehicle, so you need to take it slow over there. For the pillion, yes, it is alright. Probably not a touring friendly seat, but definitely a city commute kind of a seat, and on that front it's quite decent. Now coming to the brakes, Bajaj have always had good brakes. This one continues that same feeling. It's got a good sharp initial bite and feels good. The rear probably could have had a little bit more feedback than what I would actually want. I would actually like more feedback, but the front, absolutely you can do all your stopping on the front and it feels really good. So coming to the build quality of things, well, it is pretty similar to what we've seen on the Dominar 400. It is pretty decently put together. You don't feel any vibrations of the panels or any unwanted sounds. No issues there in terms of build quality. I like the red. So the red is available only in the 250 and it definitely looks good. So coming to the headlights, well, it is the same Dominar headlights. I'm not a huge fan of it. I'm not a huge fan of LED headlights in general. So out on the highway, if there is no other light, or basically on the road if there is no other light, it's fine and it shines up everything in front. But the moment there is oncoming light or there's other street lights, it sort of fades away. So getting aux light, definitely a good idea on this machine. So one thing I forgot to talk about is that the alloy wheels are also now different. So these are the regular alloy wheels. The other one on the 400 is the machined alloy wheels. And small things on the Dominar, which are there in the Dominar 400, still remain. Like for example, you have the the straps to wrap around your bungee, that's still there. And the mirror stalks, and these look really good, very firm, and they have good vision, and they do not vibrate at any speed, and you have pretty good quality stuff there as well. So summarizing, is this bike the right choice for somebody getting their first bike? Definitely yes. Will they have fun after riding it for a year? Definitely yes. Can this do the daily ride as well as touring on the weekends? Again, a big yes. So what they have done is that they have made the Dominar brand more accessible, and maybe would have made me like this bike more is that I wish it had a little bit more bottom end torque. That's where you basically, especially if you're in crawling traffic, that's where you want a little bit more accessible power. But apart from that, definitely a very good value for package. So like I told earlier, please don't take that as a negative as well, because with every bike you need to get used to it. So with this, after maybe about a few kilometers riding, you sort of get a hang of it. But it's still, when you want to get off the line, you really always don't want to launch it at 3,000-4,000 RPM, right? So that would have made a huge difference for me. But definitely a practical and good daily use plus touring bike. So do let me know what you think about the Dominar 250, what you wish were different or what you wish was there, and I'll see you in the next one.